Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Tammy Dorr, President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership and co-chair of Denver Startup Week. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup Week. DSW has been the catalyst for lots of change over the past decade. And this week, we're coming together to celebrate the past and dream big for the future. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our 2021 sponsors. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe, Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork. And our track sponsors who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible, our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, our designer track sponsor, Battery 621, and the Public Works, people track sponsor, Exactly, and spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement to the week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage, Path, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors, all listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our hybrid Denver Startup Week. And don't forget, use the hashtag #DenStartupWeek to share your experiences and moments of inspiration on social media. Have a great week.
Hello, I'm Sal Gentili, CEO of Friday Health Plans, and we're proud to sponsor the growth track this year at Denver Startup Week. We're a company that just entered a rapid growth phase, so we felt it was particularly appropriate. When my business partner and I started Friday Health Plans 5 years ago, we knew we wanted to create a company that catered to people who bought their own health insurance. The Affordable Care Act was just getting going, and we saw an opportunity to serve a brand new market of health insurance consumers. Independent consultants, startup groups, gig workers, service industry workers, designers, creators, and other independent professionals, like many of you here today. We knew that if we built a health plan that was simple to buy, easy to use, had great customer service, and most of all was affordable, we could compete against the big insurance plans who only focus on serving big companies. After spending 5 years getting into the Colorado market and completing a successful proof of concept, we successfully closed a $50 million round of growth funding earlier this year. We're now about to expand to 3 additional states later this year, hire more than 400 employees to support our growth, and eventually be in more than 10 states by 2025. I wish each of you good luck in your startup and growth pursuits. And as you think about your upcoming health insurance needs, I hope you consider fellow growing startup Friday Health Plans. Open enrollment starts November 1st. Check us out at fridayhealthplans.com.
Hello everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Jake Cohen, the Growth Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow. Regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, or sexual orientation. A special thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep Denver Startup Week free and accessible for all. Thank you for joining us and have a great week.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone to the panel on how to 2x your conversion rates. We're really excited to be here with you this afternoon. Just to give you a quick intro into who we are and what we do, we are all joining you from the company Havenly. Havenly is meant to provide affordable online interior design and help you create a home that you absolutely love living in. So we're going to start off with a quick round of intros. Who would like to go first?
Can go first.
Cool.
My name is Alex Cummings. I'm the director of product at Havenly. A lot of the work that I do and the team that I oversee is really around our growth, optimizing not only for organic traffic, but also converting that organic traffic, both for our design experience as well as for our e-commerce experience. And I've been with the company for about 9 months now.
And what did you do beforehand, Alex, or like any relevant experience to call out?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the probably most relevant jobs that I worked at previous to Havenly was an online grocery delivery company called Door to Door Organics that was based here out of Denver. Unfortunately, no longer with us, but a really interesting B2C business that was doing a lot of the similar things from a conversion optimization. And really what got me so interested in this space specifically, and trying to kind of understand how the users work and how to make sure that they know what you're offering.
Awesome.
Cool, I can go. I'm Christina Sokol. I am the Senior Performance Marketing Manager. So I oversee all the paid media at Havenly, and my whole career has been in paid media. So predominantly on the digital side, and that is what I'm doing at Havenly.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina.
Yeah, and I am Andrew Parrott. I am the growth manager for lifecycle and CRM here at Havenly. So you can think of us as, our small but mighty team handling everything, mostly email, but we do have some other channels that loop into the CRM and lifecycle environment as well. And prior to coming to Havenly, spent some time on the agency side. So definitely think that helps, me attack some problems from the wider angle of, being able to work with different industries in the past. But happy to be back in-house and here at Havenly.
Love it. And to do a quick intro, my name is Marta Jamrelzik. I lead our growth team, so trying to build brand awareness for Havenly, get everyone into our ecosystem, nurture them, and then ultimately get them to convert, which is exactly what today's panel is about. So everyone on this call today is very intimately involved in terms of conversion rates. What we would love to talk with you about today is just how we approach optimizing towards conversion rates at every single step of the funnel. So the way that we wanted to organize the panel today is really starting off with top of the funnel and working our way down. So first off, how do you get in front of users? How do you get them to click through and get to your website, engage, maybe leave their email address, nurture them through all of the steps in your funnel, and then ultimately get them to convert. So we are going to be starting off with top of the funnel. And in terms of top of the funnel, I think there are a few different levers that you can pull. You can test into different channels. Some might have higher intent audiences versus others. You can be testing into audiences. You can be testing into creative. So would love to hear it directly from Christina. Christina, would love to just start off and understand maybe some of the ways that you have tested into either audiences or creative to really try to drive and improve conversion rates over time.
Yeah, sure. So with any paid campaign, looking to improve conversion rates, I always work backwards from the goal. So if we're looking to achieve a specific amount of conversions, I think, how are we going to get there? So there's 1,000,001 different micro steps that you can take to improve those overall conversion rates. So first, I'm going to outline the audiences. Depending on the circumstance, we're most likely going to prospect and then retarget it. So based on what we're offering, we'll explore how to find those net new audiences through prospecting and then serve them with the top of the funnel assets, which will introduce them to the brand, product, or service. A lot of times, some of the common issues that people experience with that prospecting that can impact the conversion rate later on are high bounce rates. So if they're bouncing the moment that they reach your site, you should look at that landing page. One thing is there a clean user experience between the ad that you're serving them and the landing page environment that makes a customer feel like they're interacting with the same brand? If it's not, then you need to change something. Something as simple as updating your landing page hero image to match the image that's in the ad can drastically improve paid bounce rates and then therefore down funnel conversion rates. Another issue with top funnel video campaigns could be low completion rates. So look at your ad creative. Did you introduce your brand within the first 2 seconds? Is there an engaging story arch that is keeping the user hooked on your narrative? Did you delight with sound but design for sound off? Any of these key factors can drastically improve those video completion rates in any of those prospecting campaigns, which in turn improve those down funnel conversion rates. And then from there, you then retarget off of those. And then from the people that didn't convert, or just create lookalikes off of those that did. And then within those conversion objective assets, it's super important to then test those creative variables such as CTAs, copy, imagery, to see what drives results. Campaigns should never be set to a set it and forget it. A lot of people do that just because it's done, it's trafficked, it's out the door. Once you find something that performs, make sure to iterate on it. You should always have a champion versus challenger, so your campaigns are always improving. Beyond watching in-platform conversion rate performance, you should continue to have a pulse on landing page performance through Google Analytics. The two go hand in hand and oftentimes lie within different teams, so a lot of times that can get missed. And then within audience and creative testing, and then that seamless integration through landing pages, you can always see that CVR go up.
Awesome. Do you have any specifics, Christina, in terms of, I guess, either audience testing or creative testing, something that has just performed really well or maybe performed horribly?
Yeah, I mean, a ton. I think that like one thing that was super shocking that performs really well, and as a marketer, I hate to say it, is like really broad things. In paid media, you want to get super targeted and hit the right person and drill down into who it is by the person, by the age, by their interests, any sort of thing like that. But a lot of times really broad things tend to work because you're letting the algorithm do their job, which I hate to say it, but it does work. And then those CPMs are a lot lower. And some things that haven't worked, there's probably 1,000,001 things that I've done that haven't worked. But my mentality is always to set up tests that will inform future decisions. So even if it is a failure, it's informed something that didn't work, and then we go in another direction. So regardless of the outcome, it gave us a learning.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think there's one example that I also had in terms of creative, in terms of creative just driving a huge difference. So I'm realizing that I did not mention my background. So in terms of my most relevant or recent experience, I was a 2-time founder, most recently on the B2C side, similar to Alex, working at a B2C marketplace that was basically an Uber for kids. And what we found is that a lot of parents felt scared to use our service because the question that they kept on coming back to was just, who is going to be driving my preteen or teen around, and do I feel comfortable with them? And so what we ended up doing was actually extensive photo shoots with our actual drivers, with their actual cars in front of actual places where we might be picking up kids. So like homes or schools, with a variety of poses, sometimes drivers in the car and like leaning out, waving, smiling, standing in front of their car. And those pieces of creative just completely outperformed anything that we were running at the time, because it just put a face to the service and kind of helped overcome one of the main blockers as to why parents might not feel comfortable using our service in the first place. So really interesting to see how some of those changes can have such an outsized impact. I guess on that note, Christina, where do you get some of your inspiration in terms of what to test? So if you're thinking about testing creative, or if you're thinking about testing out audiences or even new channels, like where do you even start on that, or where do you get inspiration?
Yeah, I'm subscribed to a lot of industry e-newsletters. I love to keep up with anything that's going on in the industry, any type of like ad age things. If there's any sort of award shows, I love to see who's winning those types of awards, to see what's cutting edge. Otherwise, any sort of like a Facebook ads library to see what other brands are doing, any cool new iterations of creative that are coming out. I always make sure to keep good relationships with any sort of partners that I'm working with, the Googles, the Facebooks, Pinterest of the world, to make sure that they know that we're interested in any sort of betas that are coming out, to make sure that we, get in the know of any cool new products, placements, or anything that's coming out. So then we get to try out new stuff, because that's the stuff that is fun and exciting and tends to do really well.
Yeah, I think that's a really great call out in terms of like getting in early before things have already been, juiced to death, if you will. I know you talked about the on-site optimization experience and just making sure that you're tying in your creative to the actual landing page that you're landing users on. Are there any specific examples in terms of, I loved what you called out of making sure that the ad image, the creative itself is actually tied to the header image on that landing page, but like any other examples in terms of when you feel like this has worked particularly well or, resonated with particular audiences?
Yeah, I think that just anything with like dynamic content and integrations work really, really well with paid media. Historically, paid media has really high bounce rates, and that's just because a lot of times like the creative does not resonate with the landing page. So anytime that you can have anything that is a seamless integration, whether it be the copy, the imagery, the video, even like the theme, the coloring, the contrast, whatever it is, works super well. So anything that you can do, a lot of times like people are dynamically serving their assets. So it's really hard to get your website to match that seamlessly. So just working with a partner, I know a lot of them are extremely expensive and hard to spin up, but if you can get something set up that can have that seamless integration, it'll drastically improve that experience for the user and then also bring down those bounce rates.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. What would you advise for a company that just doesn't have the ability to spin up custom landing pages? For example, like I'm thinking if someone is searching on Google Havenly pricing, like driving them to a pricing page. So like, how would you advise that companies get creative if they don't necessarily have custom landing pages in their arsenal?
Yeah, I mean, Google always has a ton of amazing like free options. So Google Optimize is a really great option. It's a free website tool that continuously tests different combinations of website content. So it's something that you can use for free. So that's a really good place to start, especially if you don't have the budget to get one of those more expensive partnerships. So that is generally where a lot of people start. And then you can, generally go up and hit someone else once you prove the concept with performance.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good call out in terms of like resource allocation and working in tandem with product and engineering. I think another low cost solution is using something like a Webflow or an Unbounce, a no code builder that allows you to build landing pages from scratch, because to Christina's point, it can be a really great way to validate if something is working or not, and then kind of like wait to involve product or engineering until further down the line. Awesome. Thanks, Christina. So I guess now we're going to move on to the next step in the funnel. So let's say that someone has landed on your landing page. They've filled in your email address. They are officially a lead. You are trying to drive them further down the funnel. I think that's where lifecycle marketing really comes in and plays such an outsized role. So, Andrew, I guess would love to start off at a high level, how you would think about structuring a lifecycle marketing program that is focused on improving conversion rates.
Yeah, I think that's really the ultimate question, right? And so, from my perspective, when it comes to lifecycle marketing, really the imperative is audience segmentation. That's really where conversion optimization happens. We all know that sending blanket messages to a large or general audience will produce results. But the question really is, are they the highest results that in engagement and conversion that we can get from our audience? And the answer typically is no. And so really it's on the team to first identify the subsets that exist within their database. So obviously this will be unique to every company and team and industry, but common identifiers that are used are demographics, for example. So age, location, gender, that's more B2C, B2B. This might be role of the company, size of the company, those types of things. Secondly, behavior. So content engagement. And, I like to point out here that non-engagement is also a behavior as well. So not only focusing on what people are doing, but also what people are not doing. And then lastly, we'll talk about this quite a bit, but funnel state. And obviously this will look different, but a general definition of this is high intent, low intent. You can also look at traffic source as well. Some of those that are kind of relating to the intent of the user. So really, once you have those identified, you can take it one step further, and you can use a mixture of those to create personas. So that really gives you a more complete view into the individual, to get a little bit closer to that one-to-one marketing, where you can identify some of those characteristics, those traits, and where they intersect to kind of create even more segmented groups. And then I think, once you've had those, you define those buckets, once those are identified, then the real life cycle work can begin. So, typically I'll create those buckets, and then, we'll start with a high level visualization. So, generally this is identifying a workflow based on the particular bucket I'm working on, using tools such as, as simple as Google Docs, just creating a very simple wireframe visual. There's some other tools like Microsoft Visio, or even, depending on the ESP or the CRM that you are using, you can even create some of these visualizations within the actual workflow builder. And this really gives you a general sense of how, these messages should be delivered over time, and how you can branch off based on logic, based on dynamic content. And then even additionally, you can talk about movement between workflows. So if initially you had someone identified as a low intent lead, based on their behavior or information you've collected since they became a lead or entered the workflow, you can potentially pass them over to a different workflow, now knowing that they are more like a high intent lead. And then ironically enough, we can do a lot of the work on the front end, but many of the relevant data pieces that we collect and use to pass people through a lifecycle journey aren't actually generated until the user's actually in the workflow. So some of the most relevant data that users can give us is what they're doing, or again, not doing, within the workflow itself. So it's important to anticipate behavior patterns, to kind of get ahead of some of these, but a lot of them, they might catch you by surprise. And so it's really important to, get a workflow or a product stood up so that you can start passing users through it. But really keeping your finger on that pulse and checking in regularly to see how performance is going, and if there's any insights you can glean from those data points that are generated within the actual workflow.
That's really interesting. I mean, have there been any surprising insights that come to mind in terms of as you're keeping an ear to the ground of opportunities or anything that comes to mind? Absolutely no worries if not.
Yeah, and this is kind of a little foreshadowing to a little bit later, but when we've set up an experiment and it's a shorter versus a longer workflow, with the hypothesis behind this being that the longer workflow will generate a higher conversion rate. Well, that turned out in short to not be necessarily true, based on the actual layout and the serving of the content throughout, to the user as they work through the workflow. So, in short, longer is not always better. It's more targeted is better.
That's really interesting. Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. I feel like when people talk about lifecycle marketing, a lot of attention is paid towards really communicating with a lead right when they first engage with you in the experience. So I think a lot of times people think long and hard about structuring a welcome stream. If someone were starting to structure a welcome stream from scratch, what are some of the components that you think that they should be thinking through to really resonate with their audience at that very beginning stage of their customer journey?
Yeah, great question. So some of the pain points that we want to address in a welcome series, if we were, starting from scratch, it's going to be, again, unique to that business or industry, but I'll use Havenly as an example. So, at a high level, everyone that, engages with us or expresses interest in Havenly has some sort of challenge that they're facing with their home. And, they're expressing a desire that they want to improve the way their home makes them feel. So with that, there's many, permutations of what that can mean. So is it, it's a home that I've been in for a long time, and my furniture, my decor is outdated, and I, just want to have a general kind of refresh. maybe it doesn't fit my lifestyle or needs. Maybe a young couple and we just had our first child, and so we need to have a nursery designed, something along those needs or those lines. Or it could just be as simple as moving to a new space. And so, I'm moving into a new home. I really want to design this from, I don't want to bring my old furniture that I had that might not fit the space, those types of things. So it's really, again, through our experience in the industry, identifying those from the outset, right? The known pain points that we've discovered over, the course of doing business. And the key is, in starting a new welcome series is, in this case, is to identify as many of these tracks as possible, so that the users can be, directed into messaging that best resonates with them. Like we talked about before, a general message that talks generally about Havenly will perform generally okay. But will that get, 2x, 4x, 6x our conversion? No. Because it's going to have that general broad appeal, but not specifically targeted to those specific needs. So, some of the main benefits that we, try and prove in these welcome series as a whole are kind of a prove it environment for your company. So what I mean by that is that, this is where as marketers, we can, highlight the value propositions that our business provides, right? So some of those key points I talked about with Havenly, but again, even within a company, this is going to vary pretty widely by audience. So, someone who is identified as a low intent lead might need a very high, kind of that general messaging we were talking about. So it might be a space where you have your 40,000 foot view of the company and the industry as a whole. Historic challenges faced in interior design, those types of things. Medium intent users in this case might focus more on, what differentiates Havenly from our competitors, or your company from your competitors. What really is that value prop? And then lastly, high intent users might have more detail oriented objections, such as, am I getting the value for the price that I'm paying? I might need a more detailed description of how the process works, or really like what the next steps are. So with those just kind of general three buckets there, it's a very high level, but I think very appropriate application of that. I think another place that, another facet of a welcome series when building it from scratch is really including social proof. So what we mean by this is, let me see that others are using your product. And, a lot of times that is, national PR, mainstream media, celebrity endorsements, things of the like. This also can include user testimonials as well. So previously, surprised and delighted, customers. But these are a very, very powerful tool. And so what this can do is help, nudge some of those, the hesitant leads over the edge. And the interesting part here is that this will fit in different sections of a welcome series based on the user's intent. So we have found that the higher intent the lead, this is less important because they're already, quote, sold on our service, right? So they don't necessarily need to see that, this celebrity has used our service, is very happy with it. They're already, to that point where they, want to buy. This is more applicable to somebody who is maybe just dipping their toe in the water, window shopping. They don't necessarily know that if, our product or service is for them, this is what can, nudge them a little bit closer to, down the funnel into conversion.
That's awesome. Please go for it.
I was just going to say the last piece, that we really try and feature, and I think is important in a welcome series, is really value add content. So what I mean by this is content that's valuable to the end user that might not necessarily directly relate to a conversion. So one example of this is, blog articles. So we at Havenly, we have a very strong blog that we, has information provided by some of our top designers and stylists. And, examples of this is latest design trends, DIY projects, seasonally relevant content, for things that you can do in your home. And really what this does is it serves as that we are the subject matter expert in our field. And it also serves a dual purpose, right? So it gives us in the lifecycle team a constant stream of content for our campaigns, whether those are workflows or ad hoc messages. But it also serves, and it helps, Christina and some of the acquisition channels, by strategically strengthening our CEO efforts as well, because we can identify those things that we know we can rank for and write for those topics.
Definitely. That's a great call out. And Andrew, I loved your point around general content, generally performing, generally okay. Lots of generalies. It's really interesting because when users are signing up for like the Havenly design process, we usually have them go through a style quiz, and through that, we're able to get some personalized information. So for example, what is their style? We will also get what room they're trying to design. And so we can kind of personalize content that way. But you could even imagine, as someone is putting in their email address, maybe in a B2B context, you're trying to figure out like, what is the size of the company? What is their role? What industry are they in? Kind of thinking through what are the pieces of information that can make the content more and more personalized. So I think that's a great call out.
Yeah, and I think the important part there is that it can't be a one-sided exchange, right? To really get the value there and to get more conversion on some of those ancillary fields outside of just email address, you really have to prove to the user how that's going to help them, right? Obviously, the more data we have, the more that's going to help us as marketers, but we also have to provide what's the value for them. And so for us, yeah, like you said, with the style quiz, we're having them go through and answer some questions, and at the end they get a deliverable that says your target style is Scandinavian, and for a lot of users maybe they don't know that. I'm sure there are some people that know that they are, and they're probably surprised by their style quiz results. But for the most part, I think people are really looking to us to be that curator of the home design experience.
Love that. Yeah, I think that's a great call out. So I think in parallel with lifecycle marketing and trying to nurture users to the next step in the funnel, we're trying to do that in parallel on the on-site experience. So understanding kind of what is the next step that we're trying to drive users to, how can we ultimately get them to convert? Alex, would love to get your take, I guess, if you were approaching a funnel that you had never seen before and kind of approaching it from scratch, figuring out how to optimize it, what would your approach look like? What are some of the things you'd be thinking through?
Yeah, I think there's really kind of two key areas that always jump out to me when identifying the funnel. So the first is that you always want to be like data driven. You always want to identify with whatever tools are at your disposal, whether that is some kind of analytics software like an Amplitude, Mixpanel, Google Analytics can help with that, Full Story. Really getting your arms around each one of those steps and really trying to get data-driven result, like understanding of where throughout the funnel are we seeing drops, where do we see pretty consistent movement throughout. And so that data approach is always really helpful. What's also then interesting is I think there's always a battle in a way between what is great for the business and what is great for the consumer, right? So a consumer funnel, the thing that would be best for them is like, give me your email address, and then like that's it. That's all I'm going to give you. That's fine. For the business, and again, for your purposes, like what Andrew would be doing in terms of trying to engage with you, again, that generic information is really difficult. And so I think it's really important to understand what are the business needs and how do those relate to the consumer needs, because the business needs, there may be questions that you have to ask that, yes, we could make conversion rates go through the roof through our funnel if we like remove everything but one question, but that all of a sudden eliminates our ability for any of the targeting that we want to do. And so short term, yes, the numbers look great, but now all of a sudden you're like, well, hey, we got them through the first step, but now they're not converting in our shopping cart, or they're not actually engaging with our other materials. And so finding that medium, both in terms of the data, but then also how those different steps play into the business needs to identify if there are steps that can be cut, or if there's actual other data that should be captured.
That's a great call out. So let's say in that data-driven approach, you're using your Amplitude or Mixpanel or Full Story. You're looking at your conversion funnel, you see a drop off. How do you suss out what is actually driving that drop off on the user side of things?
Yeah, it's always like the magic question, right? You're like, in a lot of ways, it's actually very easy to find where things are going bad. Understanding why can often be tricky. And I think one of the best things to do is striking a balance of almost taking your own personal biases out of the equation. It's very easy to look at a page and to find something where a funnel is having some kind of leak in it, and you're like, oh well, I think it's probably this. And you're like, the second that you start jumping into it, you're almost kind of leading the witness a bit. And I think to take a step back, it's where I've actually always enjoyed a tool like Full Story. Being able to look at something that's doing, another great one is actually like doing the user research, but it's oftentimes hard to track those people down because they haven't converted your funnel. So just reaching out and being like, what happened is difficult. But using something like Full Story to actually watch how is a user interacting with that page is always a good first step. And I think, there's always going to be little bits you can glean. Are they simply dropping from the page to give you an indication that like that's a bigger hurdle than they're willing to get over? Are they going back to a previous page because they're confused on what may be going on? So I think that's always a good starting point. Certainly user research down the line, once you've kind of identified what you think may be trends based on that actual empirical data that you can capture, is always a great step. But I think it's important to look at that. And I also think it's relevant to try to slice the pie a couple of different ways to try to see if there are common themes in the data around are there specific types of users that are falling off? Are there specific types of situations, whether it's browser or device, that may be contributing, that I also think play a big role in helping to identify, is this a bug? Is this user behavior? Are we asking too much? Like those are the kinds of things that really kind of help suss that out.
Yeah, I love that perspective. On the user research side, I think that's a really great call out in terms of like, how do you find for people who have successfully gone through your funnel, your existing customers, you can definitely tap into them for user research. But to your point, they are people who have completed that successfully. One thing that we did at Van Gogh, which was the Uber for Kids company. So we were really focused on working parents, primarily working moms. We would go on Facebook groups of working moms or just parents in that general area and say, we're testing out like our onboarding flow. Would anyone be willing to volunteer their time? No payment. So many people volunteered. I think sometimes if you like ask in a personalized way, I think a lot of people are willing to help you out. But I really love your point in terms of funnels and trying to kind of like take your perspective out of it and understand, kind of have that user empathy and understand like what is driving that person to actually make that decision. At the time at Van Gogh, I was not a parent. I'm still not a parent, but was building a product for parents. And so one of the places in our onboarding flow where we just kept on seeing a large amount of drop off was around adding your child's profile. And I just couldn't quite understand. It's kind of like, well, you need to use the service. You need to put in your child's information so that a driver can effectively find them. But I think this was an area where parents just didn't trust us with that information, where it's like, I just, found this service, I'm filling out my profile, I am comfortable putting in my information, but now you're asking me for my child's photo. Like, what service even is this? Like, is this legit? And so it's really interesting kind of spending time with your users, to your point, looking at screen recordings, trying to really understand that behavior. We ended up making that part optional. And that really helped in terms of the funnel. And then it only became mandatory once you actually had your first ride on the books. So that definitely helped. So that's really interesting. Any specific experiments or examples that come to mind for you, Alex, in terms of things that you think drove outsized results, or either maybe like something that you thought would work, but that didn't?
Yeah, I think when I was at door to door, one of the things that we found is that, and again, I should say, a lot of the times funnels can differ in terms of what their end result is. So you can have a funnel that's simply just to sign somebody up. And in that case, you really are focused on the gathering that necessary information. And then you have other funnels that are transactional, where simplicity is actually your friend, right? Like, you don't want to add a bunch of questions. It's like, hey, I picked a product, I'm trying to buy that product, and like, don't ask me all like the ways of how I got here, like let me buy. At door to door, our funnel was both sign up and transactional. So we were getting you to sign up, but as a part of that process, you needed to buy a specific type of box of produce. and really identifying like what was going to be in that box. Well, every week it's different because it's seasonal. We really found that people were very interested in that, but it also like, if they're going to sign up, they're like, I want to know more about your like selection. What other products do you have? And all of that historically had been behind sign-in. And so we got to this point where it's like there was this chicken and the egg of like people wanted to sign up to see what we had, but because we didn't show them, they didn't sign up, so they couldn't see what we had. And so that was really where, like, through experimenting, you know, it was both not only the funnel itself, but also just the behavior that led to the funnel, giving them that visibility and then introducing the funnel, even though the funnel itself wasn't something that had to fundamentally change because it was already pretty like lean in terms of what we were offering, I think is something that really can be, you know, can be helpful. So it's both, what are the questions I'm asking? What is the order of those questions? How am I presenting those questions? But also, like, is the individual ready to answer those questions, or are there more things that we can do to really prep them? So I think that was an interesting thing that we learned, that once we enabled, we saw immediate results because people could feel more comfortable, very much like your, you know, your experience with the images.
Totally. That's awesome. I guess any examples, because I know we're coming to close, any examples in terms of how anyone on this call has like worked closely with anyone else, or how you see these different pieces of the funnel coming together? If not, I have a couple of thoughts.
I mean, I would certainly say, I think it's always interesting, again, when Christina was talking and also when Andrew's talking, is that like, this really is a, if any one of these kind of cogs is out of alignment, everything kind of fails. I mean, you know, you need the right creative as the first message, but if that person clicks and like that landing page, like you mentioned, is off topic, you've blown it, right? If all of a sudden they get past that, but now your funnel is, you know, they're not ready for that, or it's asking a bunch of personal questions, you've lost them. And at the end of the day, like, if you didn't ask enough questions and you're sending out those generic emails, you know, like, everything really has to be thought through. And while it's never going to be perfect every time, I think there's interesting iterations, A/B testing, a lot of like fail quickly that happens at every one of these processes, both on the development, the paid ad, the email marketing. Like, I think it's a, you know, I've been at companies where there's a lot of like desire to not send the wrong thing or say the wrong thing. And I think it's important to remember that there are certainly moments where you want to, you know, think about it and make sure you're not going too off script, but there is a lot of value in just like throwing a lot of things at the wall and seeing what sticks and using data to help determine kind of how to move forward.
Oh man, I love that. What a great note to end on. Is there anything else that anyone would want to add in? Any thoughts, comments, last pieces of advice before we wrap? All right, that's it. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of Denver Startup Week.
Thanks, everybody.